We're going to continue now with We Were Warned Cyber Shockwave. We've just seen a fictional scenario where a cyber attack crippled the United States infrastructure and the economic system. But what can we really learn from what we've just seen? And what's being done to prevent a real cyber war? We're going to get some answers now from these former high-level officials in the U.S. government who participated in this war room simulation. And I guess the first question goes to John Negroponte. Was it really realistic in the real world of today? Could the United States face this kind of crisis?
It didn't, none of it struck me as particularly outlandish, no.
If the President of the United States asked you right now, John McLaughlin, who would be the source of this attack?
I would be hesitant to say that it would be a state, because nothing we heard here today amounted to a motive, I think, for a state to do it. And states would do this sort of thing only if they were prepared, I think, to have it done to them, although attribution would be difficult, but sooner or later we'd figure out if this was a state attack.
So you're saying it would be a terrorist group? Is that what you're saying?
I would, at this point, with little data, put my money on either a terrorist group or a group of hackers who have some motive to do this, ranging from mischief to hostility toward the United States.
Anarchists, Fran Townsend, is that the likely source of this kind of attack?
You know, I actually, no, I don't think so. We know that there are foreign actors who've got capability to launch these kinds of programs.
Like who?
Well, you heard it in the context of the scenario. The Chinese and the Russians have this capability. Based on what you learned when you were in the government, and what you've learned since then, is there any evidence that there is a country right now or a foreign entity planning such an attack against the United States?
You know, I think the general view has been that for most sophisticated countries that might have capabilities like this, an attack of this kind would have such a devastating blowback effect, not only in terms of the possibility of retaliation, but just in terms of the fact that we're a globally connected world and all of our economies are interdependent, that no country would lightly undertake an attack like this.
Bennett Johnson, have you seen any evidence at all in all your years, recent years, that someone is actually planning this kind of an attack?
Certainly not on the electric grid. It seems to me that while the electric grid has certain vulnerabilities, to try to take on the whole grid or the whole Northeast reliability system is really not realistic.
Charles Wall, do you believe that the United States is prepared right now to deal with this threat?
I think we're preparing for it. I don't think we're prepared as much as we should be. I think the scenario we saw today is believable. It may be more difficult than we've made it look, potentially, but I think people would like to do this to us, and I think it would be a non-state actor myself. So I think we need to continue to now treat cyber threats the same way we do WMD, for example. We need to put the same emphasis on that, and we need to be thinking through this and start developing better policy and understanding the process better. It's still very abstract to most people, I think.
Ambassador Negroponte, does Al-Qaeda today have these savvy, sophisticated computer experts that could launch this kind of attack?
Well, they certainly have a pretty sophisticated communication capability. Whether they have the kind of experts you're talking about, I haven't had access to that kind of information.
But you're skeptical that Al-Qaeda currently does?
Well, only skeptical in the sense that their top leadership, at least, is holed up in fairly remote parts of the world.
Are you skeptical, John McLaughlin?
Oh, I'm sure Al-Qaeda would like to do this, but we don't understand their capabilities in this area, I believe. As the ambassador said, they've got great communications capabilities, great public relations capabilities. We just don't know the extent to which they could carry out something like this.
Jamie Gorelick, it sounds to me, based on everything we heard you say during this war game right now, that the legal questions are so murky and muddy out there that it sort of cries out for some either new legislation or a decision-making process that comes to grips with what's out there right now.
Well, we have to come to grips, as you put it, with the implications for our personal privacy and the relationship between the federal government and the private sector. I mean, our national security rests on a bed of wholly owned private enterprise. And unless we are very clear as to what we expect from them, expect from private enterprise in the easy times and what we need from them in the time of crisis, we are going to be left to the kind of, let's just do it and figure it out later.
Legislation is needed right now to deal with this. Again, you believe this is a realistic scenario?
Yes.
Stephen Friedman, is it possible that this kind of cyber attack could bring the entire U.S. economy to a halt?
Look, the financial system melting down, I'm incapable of thinking that as being anything other than a total catastrophe, but so would this be. Each of them in their own way is pretty dreadful. So we really need to be, this highlights areas that we need to really be getting our act together on, because this is an absolute disaster that we can see potentially coming. There are too many people who have the capability to do it who wish us ill, for whatever their motives are.
The people who are watching this program on CNN in the United States and around the world right now, they're going to be scared, Stuart Baker, because they're going to come to the conclusion, you know what? The United States is not prepared for this kind of an attack. Is that an appropriate conclusion that they should come to?
I think, unfortunately, that is true. In fact, I'm writing a book called Skating on Stilts, and I think that's exactly what we're doing. We are skating toward a fall.
Do you see any evidence, Joe Lockhart, that the Obama administration is on top of this issue? And answer the question honestly.
Then I'll have to think about it. And this will be a first with you, Wolf, but I answer a question honestly. Listen, seriously, yes, they are on top of it, but you don't solve problems like this by people like this around the table being on top of it. Jamie will back me on this. Countless meetings, in the second half of the Clinton administration on counterterrorism, bioterrorism, cyber terrorism, particularly with the work Jamie was doing. But without things like this, or without a full-blown crisis, it doesn't rise to the level where people within government take it seriously enough, people within industry take it serious enough, and most importantly, the public. So the question I think you asked is the public scared? Yes, and that's a good thing. Because when the public has a demand, the government provides the supply. It's been an extremely valuable session. I think all of us learned something, especially in the coming weeks when we all start talking about March Madness. We'll have a new appreciation of March Madness. Let me thank all of you very much for joining us. This fictional scenario we've just seen is certainly frightening, but what's even more frightening is the danger of it potentially becoming reality.